A Hong Kong court has once again given China's highly indebted real estate group Evergrande more time to organize a restructuring plan. The court has postponed legal proceedings until January 29th of next year. The real estate agent now has more time to gain backing for its restructuring plan. Last year, a creditor filed a winding up petition in Hong Kong against Evergrande, which would begin the process of liquidation. But the case has dragged on while parties tried to broker a deal out of court. Evergrande's troubles have become a symbol of the property crisis in China. Experts fear the fall of the company could trigger massive economic shockwaves.
With more than $300 billion in liabilities, Evergrande's debt woes have worried Chinese authorities, with the company teetering on the verge of collapse, threatening to bring China's economy crashing down with it. There's a lot at stake. Evergrande has 200,000 employees, several hundred residential and commercial projects in numerous cities, and until recently was one of the world's most valuable real estate companies. China's property market makes up a quarter of the economy, and it's not the only struggling developer. If Evergrande collapses, it could take other companies down with it. It's been a dramatic fall from grace. Trading in its shares were temporarily suspended, and the company's US arm filed for bankruptcy. Then in September, Evergrande founder Xu Jiayin was detained by police for unspecified crimes. Much of the billions left outstanding is owed to ordinary people who paid up front for apartments which now have little prospect of being finished. Falling property prices mean they're unlikely to get much back, if anything at all, of the money that they gave to what was one of the most trusted titans of China's booming construction industry.
It's one of the world's biggest real estate companies, it's on the brink of collapse. Right now, we can finally talk with about Evergrande, about whether it will actually go bankrupt or not, with our correspondent James Chater. He joins us from Taipei. James, why has the restructuring deadline been extended again for Evergrande by the court?
Well, yeah, this is a really big surprise. The main reason we understand for the delay was that one of the creditors that's owed money by Evergrande said that it wouldn't oppose another effort by the company to present a debt restructuring deal. As I said, this is a really big surprise in what's now a very long effort by Evergrande to restructure its debt. When it defaulted on its debt initially in 2021, it had $300 billion in liabilities. At the last court hearing in October, the judge that's been presiding over this case told lawyers that this really was the last chance for Evergrande. It appears that's now not the case. It's got one more chance to push through a restructuring deal. That's something that creditors want, as they're likely to lose more money if the company is directly liquidated.
What would it mean if Evergrande were to be allowed to actually go bust?
Well, in short, Evergrande has really become the poster child for a lot of problems that are facing China's economy at the moment. When people say Evergrande now, many people think of those infamous images of towering empty apartment blocks that now stand empty in many cities across China. As it relates to this restructuring deal, there really are still so many questions still at play. It's not clear, for example, how the company is going to deal with the situation in China. There are still roughly around 1 million people waiting for homes to be completed by Evergrande. There are hundreds of thousands of employees that are waiting for unpaid salaries. And it's really not clear what legal recourse they would have in this restructuring deal, especially given that there's still really a big question over whether this ruling, which is taking place in Hong Kong, of course, is even enforceable in mainland China. As for international investors, there's an understanding that they're not going to get back all the money that they put in initially, but they are pushing hard for this restructuring deal, as I mentioned, because they're likely to get more of that money back as opposed to the company being directly liquidated. But China's by no means out of the woods with this problem. Just last month, China's once biggest home builder, Country Garden, also defaulted on its debt. So this is a really significant issue, and it's an ongoing issue that the Chinese authorities are going to have to deal with in the years ahead as it faces this really kind of creaking property market right now.
Help us understand how we got here, James. How did Evergrande end up in this situation? What went wrong?
Well, it's a really remarkable story because the fall from grace for Evergrande has been so sweeping and total. The company's chair has been detained on unspecified charges in China. The story really begins with the kind of the ascent, China's economic ascent in the first decades of this century. Evergrande was once kind of considered one of the success stories really of China's economy. It was one of the biggest real estate developers, but much of its growth was basically fueled by debt. And in 2020, the government began a crackdown on the over-reliance of debts in the property market and what it perceived as a potential for moral hazard created by a situation where the government would essentially bail out any company that was in too much debt. So that led to this wave of defaults that we've seen in the last couple of years. And that's also crucially why we can't expect a bailout from the Chinese authorities right now. But of course, within China, there's so much concern because so much of wealth in China is tied up in property. But it's also stoked concern overseas, of course, about contagion to the global economy. So far, analysts seem to suggest that's a risk that's unlikely to kind of bear fruit.
James, thank you very much. That was our correspondent, James Chater, there in Taipei.